The Kethvari didn't waste things. That was their pride, their cultural cornerstone, the thing they repeated to every alien diplomat who came to admire their crystalline habitats and perfectly optimized cities. We waste nothing. They said it like a prayer. So when they handed Darien the cub, they genuinely believed they were being generous. She is defective, Elder Soreth explained, his four amber eyes blinking in the slow, meditative pattern that passed for Kethvari sympathy. Born without the resonance gland, she cannot commune with the hive tone. She cannot be integrated into a work family. Under traditional law, she would be released to the deep wilds. He paused, letting that sink in. We thought perhaps your kind might find use for her. As a pet, perhaps, or a study specimen. Darien Voss wiped engine grease from his hands with a rag that was more grease than cloth and looked down. The cub, Lissa, someone had scratched onto the intake form in the Kethvari's angular script. Apparently her designation before the rejection was the size of a large house cat. She had 6 limbs, the back built for quadrupedal movement, and the front two already beginning the evolutionary drift towards something resembling arms. Her fur was deep violet with bioluminescent gold threading that pulsed faintly with her heartbeat. 2 enormous copper-colored eyes stared up at him, pupils blown wide, ears flat against a narrow skull. She was terrified. She was also, objectively, one of the most beautiful living things Darien had ever seen. A pet, he repeated flatly. Or specimen, Soreth offered helpfully. Darien crouched down. The cub flinched, pressing herself against the floor of her transport container. He kept perfectly still, the way his grandfather had taught him to approach spooked horses on the farm in Manitoba. Make yourself small, make yourself slow, let them decide when they're ready. After 40 seconds, Lissa took one trembling step forward and sniffed his outstretched knuckle. Darien looked back up at the elder. I'll take her. What the Kethvari had failed to account for, what most species failed to account for, in Darien's experience, was what happened when you gave a human a broken thing. The Kethvari saw defect. They performed a clean, rational calculation. Input versus output, resource versus yield. No resonance gland meant no hive-tone communion, which meant no work-family integration, which meant negative social value. The math was simple. Humans didn't do that math. Humans looked at broken things and felt something ignite in the oldest, stubbornest part of their brain, something that said, not on my watch. Darien was a senior mechanic aboard the Joint Species Station Cradle Point, which meant he spent his days making broken things work again. Warp coils that had been written off. Atmospheric processors that every certified engineer had declared unsalvageable. He had a wall in his workshop covered in plaques from grateful captains, and a reputation among the station's alien population that ranged from admirably persistent to pathologically unable to accept defeat, depending on who you asked. He brought Lissa home and got to work. The first week was observation. He cataloged her behaviors in a battered notebook, what frightened her, what soothed her, what she ate, how she slept. She was wary of sudden movement, but fascinated by machines. She watched him strip and rebuild a coolant relay for 2 hours without moving, copper eyes tracking every tool, every part, every precise motion of his hands. You like this, huh? He murmured. Her ears rotated forward. The bioluminescent threads in her fur pulsed a slightly warmer gold. The second week, he started talking out loud while he worked. Not to her exactly, just narrating. Asterisk, this is a torque wrench. This bolt is seized because someone used the wrong lubricant. See how the thread is stripped on the left side? That's called cross-threading. Means someone was impatient. Asterisk. By the end of the second week, she was sitting beside him on the workbench. The problem of the resonance gland nagged at him. Darien wasn't a biologist. He was emphatically not a biologist. But he'd once rebuilt a quantum phase modulator using a schematic written in a language he didn't speak, guided only by engineering logic and the fundamental stubbornness of a man who had grown up in a place where the nearest mechanic was 2 hours away and you learned to fix things yourself. He pulled every xenobiology paper on Kethvari physiology he could find. He contacted 3 researchers. 2 ignored him. The third, a Velhari academic named Dr. Srin, responded with barely concealed pity. Asterisk, the resonance gland is an organic bioelectric organ. Its absence is a genetic expression failure. There is no mechanical or surgical analog. We are sorry for your loss. Asterisk. Darian read that email 4 times. Then he looked at Lissa, who was methodically disassembling a broken comm unit he'd left on the corner of the workbench. Not randomly, he realized, but in sequence, laying each component in a neat line. He wrote back to Dr. Srin, what does the resonance gland actually do at a base functional level? The answer came 3 days later, and it changed everything. The gland, Srin explained with academic reluctance, produced a low-frequency bioelectric field that interfaced with the Kethvari hive-tone network, a planet-wide web of organic signal that allowed communal communication, emotional synchronization, shared memory access. Without the gland, Lissa couldn't transmit. She couldn't broadcast herself into the network. She was, in Kethvari terms, silent. Darian sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then he started drawing. It took 4 months, 2 complete restarts, 1 minor electrical fire, and a very concerned visit from the station's chief medical officer, but Darian eventually built Lissa a resonance collar. It wasn't elegant. It looked like something a determined child had assembled from spare parts, because in a sense, that was exactly what it was. A microarray of piezoelectric biosensors tuned to Lissa's unique neural frequency, feeding into a signal amplifier he'd miniaturized by cannibalizing 3 broken subspace relays, broadcasting on the hive-tone band he'd isolated from archived Kethvari communication logs. He had no idea if it would work. He had no idea if it would hurt her. He sat on the floor of his workshop with Lissa in his lap for a long time before he activated it. She had grown considerably in 4 months. She was now roughly the size of a large dog, and she'd taken to sleeping pressed against his legs. She didn't understand what the collar was, but she allowed him to fasten it around her neck because she'd long since decided that Darian's hands meant safe. He turned it on. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then Lissa went absolutely rigid. Darian's heart slammed into his sternum. Lissa. She made a sound he had never heard her make before. Not distress. Something else. Something that sounded like wonder. Her bioluminescent threads blazed gold. Not the pale, ambient glow he was used to, but full, radiant, sunlight through stained glass gold. She scrambled off his lap, spun in a tight circle, and made the sound again, louder. Her head turned toward the station's outer hull, toward the vast darkness beyond, toward, he realized, the direction of Kethvar. She was hearing something. Something she'd never heard in her life. Darian pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes and made no sound whatsoever, because he was a grown man and a professional, and he absolutely was not crying in his workshop. Elder Sorith came personally when the report reached Kethvar. He stood in Darian's workshop with an expression that the Kethvari translation matrices rendered as profound recalibration, which Darian suspected was the closest their language got to "I was wrong." He looked at Lissa, who was demonstrating for a crowd of 8 fascinated Kethvari engineers how to replace a cracked waveguide housing, her clever forelimbs moving with practiced precision while she broadcast a running commentary into the hive-tone network that, apparently, half of Kethvar had tuned in to hear. She cannot commune naturally, Sorith said carefully. The collar is a prosthesis. It's an interface, Darian corrected. The signal is all her. I just gave her a way to broadcast it. We calculated her as having no value. Darian handed Sorith a ceramic mug of coffee, another human habit Lissa had adopted, though she preferred hers cold, and shrugged. Yeah, well, you ran the wrong numbers. Sorith looked at the mug, then at Lissa, then at the human mechanic who had taken a species reject and turned her into something their entire civilization was now listening to. We waste nothing, the elder said slowly, like a man examining a belief he'd held his whole life and finding a crack running straight through it. Darian drank his coffee. Neither do we. Across the station, across the network, across the stars, Lissa's signal sang, clear and bright and perfectly carried. The voice of a girl the universe had decided didn't matter, finally, irrevocably, heard.